It isn't very often that we hear about career politicians that begin as career artists. But it also isn't very often that we hear about Albania either. And Albania's Prime Minister, Edi Rama, did begin as a Parisian artist, moving onto the political scene in 1990 and moving into the office of Prime Minister in 2013. And since then, he has made some significant reforms to Albania, which have very much bettered them. As the Shanghai Daily explains on July 21st of 2015, that Albania has made their tourist industry something that generates revenue for the entire country. But the fact is, Albania has struggled since World War II very much, so it's going to take much more than purely tourism to be able to generate revenue in order to assimilate into a successful European nation. Thus, it is imperative that we beg the question, what can Albania do in order to make themselves a more competitive European state? And the answer is by investing in economic tactics that have been successful for other countries, because economic barriers have been very discriminative towards Albania. They can do this first, by investing in relationships with neighboring states. Second, by investing in international coalitions such as the European Union. And finally, by investing in their national sentiment in the people. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has been viewed as the poster child for economic prosperity, and that she's been able to survive the Eurozone crisis with Greece. Thus, when she went and started to speak with Albanian Prime Minister, this could also be indicative of Albania's future economic success. This is the first way that Albania can go and make themselves prosperous in Europe, by establishing themselves economically with other nations neighboring them. The Newsweek explains on July 22nd of 2015 that many Albanian citizens relied on Greece to go and get money and work in Greece and send money back to their families at home. But as Greece's economy has been collapsing, these Greece employers have not been able to pay these individuals. Thus, they have been having to look into other nations. But the fact of the matter remains that other nations are incredibly xenophobic and have not been able to be helpful to Albanian citizens who are looking to go and find employment elsewhere. But they've also been looking towards Germany, and this is probably their best bet due to their locations. The Financial Times explains on July 17th of 2015 that when Angela Merkel went into Albania to visit with the Prime Minister and the government, the fact is she saw them as a potential very successful partnership. Thus, if Angela Merkel is able to generate more positive sentiment towards Albanian citizens going and working in Germany, the fact is these citizens wouldn't have to completely reallocate their efforts, but purely relocate them into Germany in order to generate economic prosperity. But also a significant issue is the fact that Albania has very, very little to offer the economic playing fields. Thus, the second way that they can make themselves a successful competitor in the European Union, or in the European economy rather, is by joining international coalitions, such as the European Union. The Guardian explains on July 26th of 2015 that a judge once discovered several Albanian citizens hiding in an immigration detention center in another nation, refusing to go back to Albania because they feared the economic state, and it was purely better where they were, in the detention center. But it is imperative to realize that this is soon changing. As Bloomberg explains on July 20th of 2015, or May 22nd of 2015 rather, that $1.2 billion has been invested by the IMF and the World Bank into Albania in order to make them more economically robust, in order to assimilate into the European Union in the future. This would mean that Albania would have a stronger ties with other European nations, thus making them able to withstand more economic pressure from other countries and be more sturdy and bolster themselves. Thus, many Albanian citizens would feel more comfortable being in a country with maybe not the best economic status at this certain time, knowing that they would eventually grow into a stronger nation because of the ties that they have with other countries that could profit them in the long run. And finally, the thing that is imperative for Albania to invest themselves in is a common cause. This would generate citizenry that is looking towards a national sentiment. This is the third way that Albania can better themselves in the European playing field. by investing in a nationalist sentiment. The Ducewell explains on July 17th of 2015 that many Albanians still remain in Greece despite the poor economic situation, and they refuse to go back to Albania. But the fact is imperative to understand that Greece has a poor economy, and yet they are still retaining many citizens, or many citizens are still choosing to stay. And this is because of Greece's strong nationalist sentiment, and it's imperative for Albania to gain this as well. They can do this in two key ways. First, the Shanghai Times explains on April 21st of 2015 that one very strong issue throughout Albania is the fact that they have a strong deforestation issue. And this has then crippled their environment, which has then crippled their economy because of how much it relies on natural resources and the tourism industry. And it is imperative that the individual citizen exercise civic responsibility in order to better their deforestation and better their environment. But this requires people willing to work hard and give up things for the benefit of the greater good of their country. The second way that Albania can increase a nationalist sentiment is by investing in something more fun. Soccer, of course. It was reported on August 12th of 2015 that the playoffs are beginning to start in soccer, and Albania does have a soccer team. Thus, if the word was going to get out for the Albanian soccer team, showing that they were a successful competitor in the World Cup, potentially, more people would rally around this sentiment, which would just generate civic pride and a nationalist ideal that would better help their economy in the long run, because people would be willing to work harder, and citizens would be willing to stay in times of crisis. Thus, when returning to today's question, what can Albania do in order to make themselves a more competitive European nation? The answer is to invest in economic tactics that have been successful for other nations, because the barriers have been undeniable in detrimenting Albania's success. They can do this first by increasing bettering their relationships with its neighboring countries. Second, by joining the European Union and the international coalition. And finally, by bettering the nationality sentiment in the country, because citizens will work harder for something that they love.